Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is how to take Photoshop, how to use Photoshop to composite images together. The basics of what you're going to be learning today are used in basically everywhere. What you're learning in Photoshop can be applied honestly to video and animation. When you look at commercials or movies, we're going to be working with something we call a mask today, and masks are everywhere in digital graphics, okay? They are used in so many things. Web design has masking now, which is actually a relatively new development in web design, but I've been using it pretty successfully, and it's really cool. So it's a neat process. I'm going to show you a bad version, like a poor version of like how I poorly prepared for an image, this image here. Now this image was actually done, like I said, probably spring of 1995, early 1995. The assignment was, because at this point in time the internet was 2 years old, and so the assignment was to photograph what we felt people thought of the internet at that point in time. And the internet started roughly around 1993 for the public domain. So, so it's roughly about 2 years old, give or take. I honestly don't know what the public start date of the internet was. My grandfather actually worked on the internet a little bit when he was at the Pentagon. So, I mean, like, it started really as part of the military way back in the 70s, I think. And, of course, went public in the early 90s. So that was what the assignment was. So essentially what I did is I did two things. First off, I created this background, okay, which was created in an old program, and I don't remember what it was called. But it was an old terrain editing program. That's all it did, is it built terrains, it built worlds, and you could have a lot of fun with it. And you could make the worlds look a lot better than what I did here too, but I wanted it to look slightly fake. Obviously because I'm talking about the internet, and so the idea was this person in an armchair could go flying through a world that was not quite real, and so that was kind of, the artistic idea that I was going with the image. And like I said, this is 1995, so the technology was really new. And so I did the background, and then I took a film camera and I photographed my roommate with out in a chair here, and in the background is those are the RIT apartments. And what I needed to do is I needed to drop him into my new background. And it's amazing how long it took me to do that back in 1995, but of course the tools were very different than they are now. Photoshop has come a long way in 20 years, and I can do it for you very quickly now. But I made some really big mistakes with this photograph. One of the biggest being putting a guy in tan, pants on on a gray gravel, well, I said concrete walkway with brown behind him and a brown tie. Like, he's really close in color to the background. So as you're going to see in a second when I decide to redo this for you, that was a really poor choice, a very poor choice. Now I would have taken the extra 30 minutes or so and set up a background on portable stands, because they were available, and use a green piece of paper, blue fabric, whatever, to separate my subject from my background, and my life would have been a lot easier. But as it is right now, you can do it. We can do it as is what I meant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and I'm going to kind of tear that tab out, and I can just drag his layer into the image, and then we can drag him right back in again. And so now I've got him in the background image, but obviously I need to get rid of all the grass and the background that's in here. The other thing that you'll notice about Photoshop that's really important is that when I copied the new picture in, it created a new layer. Layers are life in Photoshop. They are incredibly important, and Photoshop basically revolves around them. You do not, you cannot go anywhere in Photoshop without dealing with layers. You have to have them. In fact, every object in Photoshop needs to be on its own layer, basically. And that's not always true, but 99% of the time, that's true. So here's how I can get rid of this image. I'm going to zoom in on him a little bit here. Okay, a little bit less. And I have a whole, this is the toolbox over here, and I have a whole series of tools. And this fourth one from the top, if I hover over it, says it's the Quick Selection tool. This is a very powerful tool, and what it does is exactly what it kind of sounds like. It makes a selection. It chooses areas of the image to either keep or get rid of. And you can choose what to do with those areas of the image that you select, depending upon whatever you want to do with the image. So we're going to use it to tell us to get rid of something. So in this case, you want to strategically start thinking about whether you want to select the subject or whether you want to select the background. And I think that it's the biggest determination, the easiest way to kind of choose what you're going to do there is to choose whichever one is most similar inside itself. That's a really awkward sentence. But in other words, how many different colors does he have? White, browns, skin tone. That's basically it. My background is very complicated. Trees, white, black, blue, green, and then lots of texture in the concrete. So in this case, it's probably going to be a little easier to select him than it will be to select the background. I might find that that's not true, but let's try it. So this Quick Selection tool works very easily. It's basically like a brush. I'm going to click and I'm going to hold and I can drag it down and I can let go, and you'll notice that it is snapping to the edges that it sees of his body. So as I get here, it stops at the white shirt. When I go up to his face, I click, it does a pretty good job until I get this dark area here under his chin. And then you'll notice all of a sudden it goes into the tie, it sees the tie, and then it also sees the brown in the background here, and now it's saying, oh, you want that, which I don't. The cool thing about this tool is that it learns from you. So what I can do is I can hold the Alt key down, and you'll notice that all of a sudden it gets a minus inside it, and so I can click and say, no, I don't want this, and it's going to go, oh, okay. And it's going to attempt to learn from me where the edge of my subject is. So now, as it's subtracted, it went a little bit too far into his face. So I'm going to scale down the brush a little bit with the bracket tools on the keyboard, okay? Bracket keys, I should say. And then using the plus side, I'm going to say, no, I do want that. And you'll notice that this time, it doesn't go all the way into the background because it's learned. It's learned that I didn't want this, but I do want this. And now I can just keep going. And guess what? It will probably pop into the background again here as I go along the tie. No, it didn't do it. So it's pretty smart. It's a pretty smart tool. And then as we continue down here and we start to try and get the chair, you're going to notice that there are going to be some definite problems here. Whoops. That's not what I wanted to do. All right, so now you're going to notice some definite problems here as, whoops, I go down the leg. Let's try that again. As soon as I hit this color here, you'll notice all of a sudden it just grabs the entire bottom. The reason for that is because the darks in the leg here are very similar to the tones that are in the walkway, and then the walkway is actually moderately similar to the grass, and then all of a sudden it just goes nuts. What I need to do is just tell them, no, I don't want that. So I'm going to hit the minus key. And it's going to go, oh, okay. And so just holding that minus key for a couple times allows me to kind of get all that back. And then I'll kind of go back in here and try and get the leg of the chair, and that didn't work. So I'll hit the minus key again, the Alt key, to kind of try and get some of that back. Now, the truth of the matter is, with a photograph that is as poorly prepared as this one, because this is really, really poorly prepared for what I'm trying to do for it, I'm never going to be able to get everything. I'm going to have to do this by hand at some point in time. Hey, that worked actually much better than I was expecting. But you'll notice here, the back side of the chair is completely in shadow, and we cannot tell where the shadow on the chair starts, or ends, I should say, and the shadow on the ground starts. We can't. There's no way. There's no difference in tones. So this is where a nice background would have been really good, but hey, I didn't do it, so, and you may find a photograph on the internet that is rather similar where you're trying to select things. So you're going to get to a point where you're kind of done, and you realize that you can't do much more. I can try to get rid of this center here, but you'll see it's never going to be perfect. So what I need to do now is I'm just going to kind of call it and say, okay, I've done what I can. See, just lost his hair. And the rest I'm going to take care of by hand. So now I'm going to create what we call a mask. And a mask does exactly what its name signifies. When you put a mask on your face, it hides pieces of your face. Maybe the whole thing, but usually it hides portions of your face and lets you see, so you might be able to see your eyes, whatever. A mask in Photoshop literally does exactly the same thing. It hides portions of the layer. So all I'm going to do is go down here, and you'll see a little rectangle symbol with a circle. If I hover over that, it'll say Add Layer Mask. I'm going to click, and what it's going to do is, since I've been spending all this time doing a selection, it's going to say, oh, you want to keep what you selected, and you want to get rid of, you want me to hide what you did not select. And so I just click like this, and it's gone, just like that. Now, it's not perfect. We still have some background in here, and the chair is not right, and there's all sorts of problems with this, all sorts of problems. But at the same time, that's pretty darn quick and pretty darn fast, because I've been talking while I've been doing it too. I could have been done, in half the time. So now what I need to do is modify my mask. But before I do that, let me show you what a mask is. I'm going to Alt. You'll notice over here in the layer that this new thing kind of showed up on the layer. And if I Alt-click into the layer, you will see my mask. Okay? The way that Photoshop does a mask is actually really simple. Wherever there is black, it hides that part of the layer. It makes it transparent. Wherever it's white, it shows that part of the layer. This is really, really, really cool, because it also allows you to paint your mask. So if I go to the paintbrush tool, and I just go here and I just click once, okay, and then we get out of the mask, he's now got a hole in his chest. Okay? Or I can go with the eraser tool, and I can erase right here like this, and if I Alt-click out of the mask, you can see that I got some of the background back. Okay? This is really, really, really cool. Let me pop another one in here, and let me show you what we used to do. Okay? So I'm going to drag him in again. Okay? Whoops, missed it. There we go. So what we used to do with this is we used to just take the eraser tool, and we used to erase the layer directly before layer masks were around, and that's what I had to do with this. The problem with that is, and you could pull a selection and then hit the delete key, there's all sorts of things you could do. But let's say I just erased a little chunk of his finger there, and I didn't notice, okay? And then I went and saved, and I came back tomorrow, and then I'm working on it there, and I go, oh man, I just deleted a chunk of his finger. Guess what? It's gone. It's completely gone. And in order to get his finger back, I'd have to start all over again. And that stinks, right? So with layer masking, the data is always still there. You can even see it in the preview. Everything is still there. All I need to do is click on the layer mask, and if I had accidentally, let's just say, I'll take the brush, and let's say I did delete a piece of his finger. Just like that, okay? And I come back tomorrow, and I'm looking at it, and I look closer, and I go, oh, I deleted a portion of his finger. All I need to do is click on the layer mask and erase the black that is on the finger. So I just grab that, and I can just get his finger back. And that is so cool. I mean, I cannot tell you guys how, when this first came out, like, I hit the roof. It was like, wow, this is so cool, because you never have to worry about deleting something permanently. So it's really, really important that you always use layer masks. There is no excuse for you to be erasing on the actual layer. And that's a really big thing. If you notice here, see, the layer mask is selected. If I'm accidentally on the layer itself and I use the eraser tool, guess what? I've actually erased the layer. And so now if I were to save this and come back tomorrow, that's all gone. Okay? So it's really important when you're editing with layers that you make sure that you select the layer mask first. I'll undo that. Does that make sense? Okay, now, with this image, like I said, you know what? Like down here, where this shoe ends and where the shadow begins, or with the back of the chair, how do you know where one ends and the other begins? You don't. And so really what you have to do is you have to make it look good. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to take my black and I'm just going to paint it. And I could probably use another selection here just to help me get a little bit closer without, being too, wobbly or whatever. But I'm going to get really close. And then when it comes down to the shoe here, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to make it look right. So I'm just going to kind of, yeah, that's about what a heel, I might even use the other one as a reference, to kind of like how skinny are his ankles, how skinny are his feet, use them as a reference. And if it looks right, then nobody's going to question. Because nobody's going to be able to even know that there was a shadow there. Like, it's just not even going to come up in their minds that there might have been a shadow there. And then if I need to get a little bit back, I go to my eraser tool, and I should be able to get some of that back to kind of give him a little bit more of a heel here or whatever. And that may be the shoe, that may be the shadow. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that it looks correct to the people who are actually, looking at my picture, right? So who cares if it's actually real or not? All that matters is that it looks right. So I'm going to have to go through here and just do a lot of this by hand. The other thing that's really cool about layer masks and these tools is that you can also do opacities. And this helps in the hair. So if we go and we take a look at the hair, now see this line here? That's actually pretty typical. It didn't quite get all the background there. So I'm just going to take my brush and I can just take care of that, just like that. So one of the other cool things about layer masking, being able to paint this stuff by hand, is that you can also do opacities. And opacities can really help with hair, because hair is really difficult. It's going to be very rare that you'll be able to go in and select each individual piece of hair, because hair starts to look really blurry when you're looking at the edges. So what's really handy is that I can actually paint in different opacities with the brush that actually translate to different opacities in the mask. So for instance, if I take my opacity down to about 30% and I wanted to make his face kind of ghosty, oh, I did it again. It's not working the way I'm used to. If I wanted to make his face kind of ghosty, at 28% opacity, I can just click. Now let's take a look at the mask and see what I did. See how it's a little gray? It's just gray. And if I click again, you can see it gets a little grayer. And then if I alt-click out of the layer mask, you can kind of see how his face is see-through now. Okay? So he kind of has a ghosty appearance. I could use this to grade if maybe I wanted him to be like ghosty. So I would make all of his skin slightly grayish. You know what I mean? Or have a different opacity. So you have a lot of power with that. Let's undo that. And where it becomes very practical, at least in this application, is the edges of the hair. So if I zoom in, you can see this fine white edge. But hair, because of its size and how fine it is, very rarely ever has a hard edge. And this is a good thing to note. You can usually tell on the internet when a photograph's been photoshopped by looking around the edges of the hair. It's like where it's the hardest to do. And a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times the easiest thing to do is right-click, take the hardness of the brush all the way down. And what that does is creates a different kind of a circle. So if I click here, let me set the opacity up to 100%. So there, 100%. See how it's kind of got a soft edge to it? If I right-click and do a hard circle, can you see the difference? I didn't change the size of the brush at all. What it does is it changes how it fades into the center. So I can use that edge hardness, put it all the way down, put my opacity down to like 30% or so, and I can just go along the edge of the hair with a smaller brush here and start to blend it into the background a little bit better. And it takes several clicks. I might go up a little bit in opacity here so it doesn't take quite as long. But it's better to take a long time than it is to make a big mistake. But now you can see how I've gotten rid of that white outline that was around the hair that you can still see up here. And that kind of is a telltale sign to somebody that an image has been photoshopped. So I want to kind of get rid of it. So I use a brush at a lower opacity to do that. And if we go and we look at the mask again, you can see how I've got now gray tones. It's not a hard edge like it is over here. It's getting fuzzy. It's getting softer. And that allows it to kind of fade in. So that's a really nice thing also about masks. Now, a lot of this stuff you guys will just learn as you're moving through it and as you're doing stuff. However, let's take a look at what would be an easier photograph. Here we have a photograph of one of my students for a project just like this against a green screen. So if I do the same thing and just drop her off in this background, now that's a much higher photograph, so she's a lot higher resolution here. So first I have to scale her down. So edit, transform, scale, okay, just like this, and then scale it down like that, okay, that's pretty good. So now I have a green solid colored background. This makes my life a lot easier. I mean a lot easier, because now what I can do is instead of trying to select her, I can select the background, and watch how much easier this is than it was with the other image. So I'm just going to take my brush with the quick selection tool, and I'm going to start painting on the background. Now hair is always trouble, as I said, and see it missed the guitar, but that's okay. Alt, minus, say no, I wanted that. And zoom in a little bit so we can take care of the tuning knobs on the guitar here. Oops, I went the wrong way. So I'm trying to minus that because I don't want that. And then I hit the plus and I say, yep, no, I wanted that. And you can see how it's learning from me. It's so cool. I love it. Okay, that looks pretty darn good. Get that in there. We're not really going to be able to get that. We'll have to do that by hand. Get that underneath her armpit here. Whoops, I went too far. It was my fault. And yeah, so it learned really quickly what I wanted and what I didn't want. And I think it came up with a pretty good selection. There's always stuff that you're going to have to, fine-tune a lot of times. Did it again. So now, all I have to do is hit my quick mask tool, and look what happens. Now watch, this is actually not going to work correctly. Oh. Why didn't it work right? What did I do? I selected the background, and the mask is going to assume that you want to keep what you selected. So there's a really easy way around that, and that is to inverse your selection. So right under the select menu, there's an inverse. Now it's selected her, and when I hit the layer mask, boom. Now obviously we've got some stuff to deal with as far as her hair is concerned. Okay, we've got green in there that there's no way we were going to be able to get, and here, okay, around the edge. Especially with curly hair, it's even worse. okay, than it usually is. But look at that, I'm done. And that took, I don't know, I was talking, it took like 2 minutes, but I mean, I could have done it in like 60 seconds, okay? So with the green screen, it's a lot simpler, and I hope that you can see that. And that's why we're going to be using our green screen wall for this assignment, is because it's going to be so much easier to take care of getting rid of the background on your subject that way. Does this make sense to everybody? Yes?